This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hey gang, this is Humans of Gaming, where we talk to and learn about the humans behind our games that we love. My name is Chris, and I'm the Chief Executive Nerd for Love Thy Nerd, and co-host of this podcast. The other person that usually is here, Drew, isn't here. He bailed on me, but I've done that to him before, so I forgive him. And anyway, I'm joined today by Luke Dicken from Zynga Games and IGDA. What's going on, Luke?
Hey, Chris. Good to be here.
Yeah, and you are currently on a vacation-ish down in San Diego, right?
Yeah, emphasis on the ish, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But trying to get away and get a bit of a break. It turns out San Diego's pretty close to San Francisco, so that's a new thing that I found out this weekend.
Yeah. It's still, I don't know. I mean, how would you compare San Diego to San Francisco at this juncture? Better, worse, different?
It's definitely warmer, and what I've experienced of driving here is a lot more kind of laid back and chill. There was like gaps between cars and things, which was new.
Yeah, I don't experience that in LA, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, LA is worse than SF, but like there just seems to be a lot more space here.
That's cool. That's good. That's a good quality for a vacation.
Yeah.
So, Luke, tell us who you are, like what you do, industry wise, where you work or how people know you. I mean, guess just kind of, give us the Luke Dicken elevator pitch.
So my background is entirely in artificial intelligence. I got really interested in AI when I was about 14 years old.
Okay.
And I came to it from games. There was a game, nobody's ever heard of this game, but it was called Creatures. And
nope, I've never heard of it.
Like,
so
this is what I'm saying.
The streak remains.
So it was basically a Tamagotchi on steroids.
Okay.
So you've got this side-on view of the world, and you've got these little furry creatures wandering around.
Yeah.
And you could kind of play with them and kind of bounce a ball and teach them things and train them.
And this was like on PC or what?
This was PC in like kind of early 90s kind of time. Okay. So we're talking like probably Windows 95, maybe even 3.1.
Okay.
The cool thing about this game was that the developer had spun out of the University of Cambridge, and it turns out that all the stuff that was backing this thing for breeding these creatures together and training them and teaching them and kind of there was positive and negative reinforcement. You could punish them, and they would kind of breed and pass on traits to the offspring. Yeah. It was all legit artificial intelligence stuff that was backing it. University of Cambridge at the time was like a really kind of on the forefront.
I was going to say, that sounds like pretty revolutionary for some early 90s stuff.
Well, what's really fascinating about all this stuff is that like a lot of the AI revolution that's happening right now is based on techniques that are at least the 90s. You might hear buzzwords like deep learning kicking around, but deep learning is basically just neural nets, and neural nets have been with us since, I don't know, 70s, 80s, something like that. But you see this whole thing as a teenager, and you kind of go, "Oh my god, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen."
Sure.
And that pretty much set me on my path for life, pretty much. So I went and did an undergrad program at the University of Edinburgh, which was one of the pioneering kind of AI institutes in Europe. And it was also conveniently about 2 hours from where I was living at the time, which was just far enough to kind of have independence, but close enough to go
do your laundry
and run home. Exactly. Literally that. So, undergrad turned into a master's because I didn't do super great at the undergrad and decided that I probably ought to have a slightly better qualification than kind of, I don't know what the classifications are in the US, but this was kind of like I graduated with effectively a C
Oh, okay.
from my
Yeah.
undergrad. And for some reason, they allowed me to take a master's program. So I did that
Yeah.
and came out of that okay. And then I went to a different university that nobody has ever heard of called the University of Strathclide.
Yep, you're
Um,
right. The streak's
I mean,
alive.
yeah. So, coming from overseas, like this is not uncommon. So University of Strathclyde is kind of it's actually an old university. It dates back a few hundred years.
Oh.
But it's in Glasgow in Scotland.
Mhm.
So, it's not one of the big name, kind of well known and also known as a city name. So people tend not to kind of have heard of it. But they had a cutting edge research group that I joined for my PhD program. And about 6 months into that program, they said, "Hey, by the way, we've got this research masters that's a taught program, and we've got scholarship funding available for that. And we forgot to advertise it. So how about all you new PhD students go and do that for a year?"
Wow.
So, so I've ended up with like more degrees than is really recommended, all in AI. And then the PhD that I went back to at the end of this talk program was specifically AI for games. So kind of drifted through a more kind of theoretical AI to begin with, and then drifted back towards the games industry as I kind of wrapped up that PhD. Started getting more heavily engaged with the community. This would have been just as kind of Twitter was taking off,
Okay.
maybe kind of 2010-ish.
Mhm.
And that's where I got involved in the International Game Developers Association. So I know you had Kate Edwards on a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So she used to be executive director for the organization, but
What a legend, man. That was cool talking to her. She's been around
yeah,
forever.
absolutely. So I won an award from the IGDA
Mhm.
to attend E3. So this is the IGDA scholarships. So every year, a group of students are selected who are notionally the best and brightest,
Mhm.
and they get. Well, at the time, it was just a conference pass. Now, and I'll skip ahead a little bit. Now that we're running the program through the IGDA Foundation, we offer travel money. We kind of have a whole broader kind of suite of
Yeah, yeah.
things. But back in those days, in 2011, it was literally just, "Hey, come to
Yeah.
LA. We've got a
Get
pass
yourself
for
here.
you
We
at
got a pass
E3."
for you.
And to their credit, they gave a whole bunch of other opportunities
Yeah.
as well. So
Hey, passes to E3 aren't
the
cheap, so
well, exactly, and then kind of the extra add-on that you get as kind of like being introduced to really kind of core legendary people.
right.
Uh, so that kind of started me on this path of engagement with the IGDA because like I came back from Los Angeles, kind of feeling like I got a life debt to the organization effectively.
Hmm.
Um, so I got involved with
Sorry,
the Scottish
before we
chapter.
keep going, I just wanna make sure that, tell us what the IGDA is, even what the acronym is. I mean, I know, but for
So
our listeners, you know?
it's the International Game Developers
Mhm.
Association. So there's kind of two halves to the organization, and we'll be talking about the charitable side of things probably a little bit later. But the IGDA itself is like the membership association for game developers. So back in the 90s, there was a whole kerfuffle around Mortal Kombat, and there were hearings in the US. I think there were congressional hearings
Yeah.
or Senate hearings, or um, and there were representatives kind of going in and representing the companies and talking about the company perspective on stuff, but nobody was really speaking on behalf of the
Right.
developers. And kind of that's where the IGDA started as this kind of organization that could be a voice for kind of members working within the industry, but not necessarily like the corporate interests of those people.
Sure.
And today, it's obviously a big chunk of the industry is in the US, but the IGDA kind of aims to be a more international and inclusive organization. I think there's over 100 chapters now around the
Oh,
world.
wow.
Some of the biggest chapters are in like Finland and Estonia, have great representation. I've not seen membership numbers recently. The last number that I heard was that there's about 10,000 members around the
Phew.
world. So it's an organization that, for better or worse, and I probably have views on this that are not necessarily going to make me super popular, but unions in the industry are not a thing yet, at least. There's a union kicked off in France, I believe, and there's the Game Workers Unite group is kind of starting to organize around the world, but nothing's really getting the critical mass that it needs to actually kind of go. In the meantime, the IGDA has kind of been, I can't say it's been filling that gap because it's not aiming to be a union.
Sure.
But in some ways, like, it's trying to be that kind of community organization for at least advocating on behalf of its members, and also providing kind of professional growth and networking opportunities and those kinds of things. So I got involved in that in kind of 2011, 2012, ended up running the Scottish chapter of the organization. Concurrent with that, I won the award that I mentioned to attend E3. I won it to attend Casual Connect and then GDC. And then I think partially in an effort to get me to stop winning them, they said, "Hey, so what if you ran this program?"
Yeah. And what did you have to do to win these awards? Like, what was the criteria for that?
So, like I said, it's always been a little bit woolly, or at least it was in those days. We've tightened it up quite a bit in the intervening time, but effectively, you've got to be a student in a discipline related to games.
Mm-hmm.
And we take a pretty broad view on what that means. So we've had political science majors who have an interest in using kind of gamification and games techniques as part of their political campaign kind of work. Lawyers, audio designers, obviously programmers, game designers, producers, like anybody who is even tangentially interested in the kind of game making discipline kind of gets to be eligible. There's a kind of written essay criteria around, like, how are you volunteering in the games industry? How are you volunteering outside of the games industry? What are your career aspirations? How is going to this event going to kind of benefit you? And then that gets handed off to a judging panel who kind of review. We're now running four programs. And we get something on the order of 500 or 600 applications to these programs.
Wow.
So that judging panel is pretty significant at this point. But the idea is that we're kind of finding people who are, for the Scholars Program, it's kind of anybody who's a student who we think is going to go places. And, obviously I've been an alumni. People like Robin Honecke, who is CEO at Phenomena now. Aaron Hoffman-John, who's at Google on the Stadia team. There's a whole bunch of people who've kind of come through this program and then kind of started making their mark on the industry. And the program itself has been running since 2001. So we've got we're headed up to over 1,000 alumni now across all our programs.
Okay. Cool.
So I started running the Scholars Program, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up to be the first person on the board of the IGDA itself from outside of North America.
Oh, nice.
Which felt like a pretty big milestone for the International Game Developers Association.
For sure.
And from there, I transitioned over and started. I became chair of the IGDA Foundation. So the foundation is the charitable aspect of things. So where the IGDA is kind of focused on membership and kind of advocacy for members, professional development for members, the foundation is more focused on kind of betterment of the industry at large, and particularly with a focus on diversity and inclusion. And I took that over in 2014, about 6 months before I got a job offer at Zynga and kind of moved across 5,000 miles to live in San Francisco. And, you had your first board member from outside of North America actually move to North America, which was not necessarily the best thing in the world from that lens.
You lost your token foreigner status.
Well, exactly. Still got the accent, but it made scheduling the meetings a little bit easier. So kind of the foundation stuff started. It really was a small organization at that time. We've grown by a factor of 500 since then. So it started as something that I could quite easily run in my spare time. Particularly given that I was doing my PhD, I was kind of in the later stages of it. I was beyond done with my research. Like I was just looking for anything that I could do that wasn't focused on kind of. It turns out that I'm a very small, short-term project kind of guy.
Oh yeah, I get that.
So 8 years into this PhD, I was ready to just kill myself and move on. But so I was running a studio and doing AI work for hire on the side. I was getting involved with the IGDA. I was doing pretty much anything that I could to just avoid doing this, which meant that the foundation got a whole bunch of attention. And then I joined Zynga and suddenly didn't have a lot of time, because it turns out if you kind of take a real job, that eats your time.
It tends to do that.
So I joined Zynga as a data scientist. As the foundation was ramping up,
and Zynga, sorry, just for people, Zynga, like, you may have heard of this little game called like Farmville, and there's just a plethora. Like, Zynga's a big deal in like online games, mobile games, like all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. So I can give you the quick sales pitch on Zynga, because I just wrote it for the talk that I'm supposed to give at this conference on Wednesday.
Nice.
So like you say, Farmville is ours, Words with Friends, Zynga Poker. These are kind of the games that brought us to prominence on the Facebook platform. And we've been around for over 10 years now. But we've made the transition to mobile. I believe over 90% of our revenue now is on the mobile platform. We've acquired some studios. We've picked up a studio in Istanbul making Merged Dragons, one in Helsinki making Empires and Puzzles. So we've got over 50 titles in the portfolio now, I believe. The last numbers that I saw, these are, where are we? These will be 2018 numbers. 85 million monthly users and $907 million in revenue for 2018. So
I don't know the latest like League of Legends numbers, but I think that's more than that. Or like you got Zynga's more than, because I think the last league numbers I heard was probably 70 million or something like that. Like total play. That's not even like this is how many people monthly.
I wouldn't like to speculate because I wouldn't like to be wrong.
Yeah.
I think as a single product, League is significantly larger. Maybe as a portfolio, but like don't forget the Riot's got a single title.
Oh, right, sure.
But I would speculate that their revenue numbers are probably pretty significant. Particularly when you factor in all the kind of ancillary, like League is a cultural phenomenon in a way that you could maybe argue Words with Friends was, or maybe Farmville used to be. But like none of our games get kind of 100,000 people watching a live stream, put it that way.
I think though, to Zynga's credit, like it's made gamers out of people that maybe didn't think they were gamers.
It depends on it depends on whether you're using
it's a loaded term. I get it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who play our games who wouldn't necessarily identify as gamer with a capital G. This is a conversation that I have with my mom on a regular basis. She will sit and play some of our match 3 games, like Wizard of Oz Magic Match. So match 3 is like Candy Crush like kind of game. She'll sit and play that. She'll sit and play Words with Friends. She plays a whole bunch of games, and then she'll say, "Oh well, games people," and I'm like, "What do you think you do every night?" So we're in this world now where I've kind of got a split personality, half on the foundation side and doing kind of charitable stuff and very heavily focused on diversity and inclusion, and then with the day job kind of just heads down working on AI things that are not diversity and inclusion, and kind of just actually cranking out good work for the company.
I think, I mean,
And
do
this is
you
part of,
find, speaking of the day job, like I would think it would be really helpful in your work with IGDA to like kind of be in the trenches a little bit, like giving you that perspective. And do you find that that's helpful for what you're doing with the IGDA?
I think the answer has to be yes. Partially because like I started running the foundation as, like I say, as a research student with very minimal industry
Yeah.
experience, and now I'm in a position where I'm kind of running a team in a large studio. It gives me a lot more perspective on like what the challenges of having worked in the industry, having kind of come through a variety of teams within Zynga, and then now leading my own. There are definitely ways that feeds backwards and forwards. Even just understanding large company hiring practices, for example, gives us some insight into ways that we can leverage process around
Yeah.
hiring for kind of emphasizing diversity and inclusion, or even just terminology. I'd never heard terms like headcount or hiring manager, and now they're just part of my lexicon.
Right. Yeah. No, that's cool. So then that's kind of brought us up to current right now. You're doing the Zynga thing
Yeah,
and you're doing the IGDA stuff.
yeah. So the IGDA stuff has turned up to 11. This is kind of why I'm working so much on vacation. Unfortunately, so we had a member of staff as our executive director, Jen McClain, who is a career exec. She's been in the industry for many years. So she'd been serving as our executive director, and unfortunately, Amazon made her an offer that she couldn't
Mm,
refuse. So she resigned from both
freaking
executive director of the
Amazon.
IGDA. Exactly. But she sort of she told me as it was kind of coming together. She was like, "So, Amazon's gonna make me an offer, and like I'm thinking I have to take it." And I was like, "Okay, cool. What's the offer?" And then I was like, "Yeah, you should." So she's now. I mean, just the title alone, she's head of worldwide business development for small and medium studios at Amazon Game Tech.
Wow.
Um, and that's kind of a role that's like, yeah, okay,
Jeez.
that's a title that, like, if somebody offers you the title, you just go, yeah,
Sure.
okay. Um, so unfortunately, I couldn't have any kind of ill will or animosity to her. She's been one of my closest collaborators. One of my, she's been my partner in crime for the last 2 years. So I want all the good things for her, and unfortunately, that meant she had to step away from the role, and that's meant that I've had to step into the
Yeah.
role. So on top of a fairly demanding day job, kind of picking up 20 high-powered hours of kind of seasoned CEO time and trying to fill it in myself with, I've got maybe 5 hours a week, and I'm trying to do 20 hours of her time with that. So it's the last month is I'm really developing that 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah. So you've been in this role for how long then?
The foundation role. So I've been chair of the foundation for about 5
Yeah.
years. I've been acting executive director for about a month now.
Oh, okay. So you're still just dialing in here on this new gig.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. Fortunately, now that we're past the big game developers conference, which happens in March,
Hmm.
that's kind of our hugely busy
Yeah.
period. So things have gotten a bit quieter, and it's really giving me the opportunity to take stock and figure out where we're at and how to move forwards. And we've got an excellent board who's been very supportive, and we're just actively trying to find a great candidate to take the role on.
Right on. Well, I want to turn the corner a little bit because one of the
Yeah.
things we really love to do with our show is kind of dig deeper, and we don't share a lot, maybe like why we like to do that. But really, the reason came out of this. I mean, we're nerds and we are gamers, and we see this culture and we see the good things in it, we see the bad things in it, and I think some of the bad things are kind of I don't want to overstate, but like a dehumanization of the people that make the games we consume at an alarming rate. It kind of creates this sense of entitlement and just nastiness sometimes. And so we kind of wanted to do this show to like highlight these folks that, work at a giant place like Zynga or even smaller like indie studios, and kind of put a spotlight on and say, hey, like people are people too, and get to hear, where those motivations come from to make these games, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd love to dig into some of that stuff with you, Luke, and just kind of hear, what makes you tick and what gets you excited about AI and all that stuff. So I guess to start, like where was your genesis? Where'd you grow up?
So
We hear
I
the
was born in
accent, so we
England.
know it wasn't here.
Yeah, well, yeah. Born in England and then raised in Scotland.
Okay.
So I moved up when I was about 11, but it's kind of why I don't have a strong English accent. I don't have a strong Scottish accent. I've got kind of questionably generic British. And then I moved over here for the Zynga gig. So 11 to 30 would have been in Scotland,
Right. Yeah.
and then the last kind of 4.5, 5 years have been over here.
Okay. Cool. Where in Scotland?
So a little town outside of Glasgow. So kind of Glasgow, probably on the fringe of like the Glasgow metro area. So the west coast, technically in the Highlands. So the Highland demarcation line is like a fault line that runs kind of diagonally up Scotland.
Oh, okay.
Technically, I was the other side of it. So technically, I grew up as a Highlander.
That's not a bad title to have.
It's
It
pretty
brings some
decent.
certain connotations with it, like you're going to chop off my head, but
I mean, like, you're probably okay because you're not actually in the room.
that's fair. Yep. So my wife and I and some friends went to Edinburgh a couple years ago, and I think it's officially my favorite city I've ever been to.
Edinburgh's really, like, being a Glasgow boy, I'm not supposed to say it, but Edinburgh's actually a really nice city. I spent, so I did my, I think I said my undergrad and my master's there.
Yeah.
So I spent 5 or 6 years there, and it's a great city.
I loved it, and Iron Brew for life.
Yes, yes. The only iron brew that I've been able to get over here is in plastic bottle, and I don't know what happens, but it's not the same.
Yeah, we have it was so weird because we have friends in Northern Ireland, and they have Iron Brew there. That's actually where we first learned about it. So Iron Brew is it's kind of like an orange, if I'm going to explain it to, my people, the Americans, Iron Brew is like kind of an orange cream soda, but it's so much more. It's a lifestyle.
But like violently orange.
Yeah, like make your pee orange kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's I think neon orange is probably the best way of
totally.
describing the color.
Yeah. But yeah, we learned about it over there, and interestingly enough, there's this little import store in downtown Ventura where I live, and I don't know, we just happened to be in there one day and saw that they had Iron Brew, but the same thing, it's only in bottles. It's just not the same.
Yeah. It's not. You need you need the interaction between all the chemicals and the aluminum, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably it. So anyway, so growing up, Scotland, what was that like? Like what was your upbringing like, parents and all that kind of stuff?
So, I mean, one of the things that I probably ought to call out is that my mum was a coder before. Like, she was coding on punch cards. She's
so it's in the blood.
Pretty much. My dad was an IT manager. In fact, I think he might have been her manager at one point, and I've kind of not asked too many questions about that. I grew up surrounded by computers. I think I got my first computer as a birthday present when I was 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
And that was it started off as a Spectrum, a ZX Spectrum, which I don't think they were as big over here, but it was kind of Commodore and Atari era, but a British kind of flavor of that. So it came with a tape drive, it came with a whole bunch of games, but it broke on such a regular cadence that, like, I think we returned 3 of them, and eventually the store was like, "Hey, do you want something else?" So I swapped it out for an Atari ST in the end.
Oh, okay.
So I was kind of Team Atari rather than Team Commodore, and kind of got my first taste of programming there with BASIC, and I was not good at it.
You got to start somewhere.
And then, well, exactly. And then from there, kind of hacked together some really horrible things in BASIC, and then kind of, I wouldn't say I was a good coder until maybe the 3rd year of university.
Okay.
well, I wouldn't say I was a mediocre coder until the third year of university. So we started learning Java, which is very different from BASIC, and I just could not wrap my head around it. And then one day it all just clicked into place. But yeah, so growing up, I mean, one of the things that you have to understand about growing up in Scotland is it's culturally very different. So, like, Highland country dancing was a thing that we learned in school, which was weird for me
Yeah.
as like a guy moving up from kind of Yorkshire to this place where it's like, you wait, you want me to do what? No, that's but country dancing was a thing, and in my area, sailing was the kind of big thing.
Really? Okay.
So the kind of little patch of water that this town is on has produced, I think, more Olympic level sailors for the British squad than anywhere else.
Interesting.
And some of those folks who are on the squad right now are actually people who I taught sailing to when they were little kids. Now, I was teaching them very much like 101. I'm not going to try and take credit for any of their kind of. They went on to learn from some really good
Yeah.
people.
Hey, but you laid that foundation, so
Sure, let's say that. So, I mean, those were kind of the big things, and
so a
I kind of
little
all
different than gaming.
yeah. So, um, every Friday night for me was hanging out with my best friend in particular, but maybe a few of us, and we would we got to a place where we'd got two computers that were networked together, and we would play StarCraft a lot. When we got fed up of that, we would sit down and play like Magic the Gathering. Um, so we were kind of the stereotypical kind of gamer nerd back in those
Yeah.
days. And then on a Tuesday evening, I was out yacht racing, which was not that. But yeah, it was kind of, I can't say strange, but because it was completely normal for me. But looking back at it, there was this kind of split between classic yacht maintenance and kind of
Right.
what in America, and the thing to kind of really call out is that it just wasn't that big a deal. Like, I think in America there's this kind of I won't say stigma, but like sailboats are a rich person's kind of toy,
Oh,
and
sure.
that just
Yeah.
wasn't the
Mhm.
case back home. Like, the school that I was at had two of these kind of 90-year-old wooden racing yachts, but I once I left the high school, I bought one myself, and it was like £1,200. So what's that? $1,600.
Right, yeah.
So not like dirt cheap, but at the same time, like, it's not crazy
Yeah.
expensive. So it really was like just one of the things that you did, and culturally, it was equivalent to like just having a wee car, I guess, that you race around the racetrack or something.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where my attention was, and then we hit senior year of high school, and kind of I got an unconditional acceptance to Edinburgh. So the system works. I actually have no idea how the system works here, but over there, like, you can sort of apply for college in your penultimate year of high school, and then you might get accepted, and that might come with like, well, okay, in your final year, get these grades, and you're
Yeah.
in. And it might come with like, cool, you've got enough, just come on over when you're ready. And I got that. So my kind of senior year, I did not really do a whole lot. I cruised through a couple of courses and got very mediocre grades. And outside of that, I was hanging out playing. We'd got an N64
Yeah.
set up in like the senior
You sound
room.
like someone else I know.
So we were,
Yeah,
oh
me.
yeah, oh, well, there you go. So it was all comers GoldenEye,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then out yacht racing, and then Magic the Gathering in the evenings.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it was a decent way of living for
Not
a
bad,
bit.
I'd say. How were
But
your what was your
kind of
parents' take on gaming? Like, being that they were pretty into like coding and all that stuff, were they gamers too, or did they kind of support that for you, or they were like, no, it's a waste of time? Where'd they land?
uh, they were encouraging, but in
Okay.
moderation, I think. So for a long time, the computer was in a common room in the house, and it was screen facing out into the room so that they could at least check up on what I was up to. And then kind of later on, I got my own machine up in my bedroom, but it was kind of monitored, I think, and they were broadly pretty engaged with it. I mean, like I say, they aren't gamers today, and whenever they come visit me, they I was going to say they sit and watch me play video games on a regular basis, but I guess they don't really have that much of a choice, given that I'm playing in the living room
Yeah.
of my apartment and they're staying at my
Yeah.
apartment. So, but certainly, like there wasn't really a lot of pressure. I guess there was kind of general academic pressure. There was a lot of kind of like, hey, you got 90% on this test. What happened to the last 10? But there wasn't a lot of you will do this and you will follow in our footsteps, and there was no. I felt very free to pursue whatever I
That's
wanted
cool.
to do. And the sailing thing, like my mom and dad had always had like a motorboat. They kind of had like a little speedboat since they first started dating, I think. And then they'd gotten on to like more like larger motorboats that have got a little room for sleeping on and stuff. But they were not into the sailing side of things. And when I kind of fell into it, again, they were super encouraging. So they've always been very supportive, even when they didn't necessarily share it.
That's my goal. If and when I'm ever a parent, like I think that's the I don't know, the mark of a good parent is like being able to support things that your kids are doing that you yourself could care less about, or like that you yourself don't have interest in, or that you yourself maybe even like disagree with at some level. But like if you're still able to support your kid, that's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it created an environment for me that was nurturing, and it allowed me to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And like you're saying, like that's got to be the ball game at the end of the day.
Yeah. What about religion? Like, was that a part of your upbringing at all with your parents?
Not really. I mean, I got baptized, obviously before I could really remember,
And that was Catholic?
and I think that's a great question that I probably ought to know the answer to.
Probably. If it was like
Um,
infant, then it probably was.
well, certainly my dad grew
Okay.
up Catholic. I think my mum's side of the family might be Protestant, maybe. Um, but it's never been
Maybe
enough
they
of
just
a
did both just to be
thing.
safe.
Yeah,
Sprinkled a little Catholic water, a
I
little
don't know.
Protestant water on you, and all your bases are covered.
Yeah. So the schools that I was at, they were all private
Mm-hmm.
schools, and they were sort of they claimed to be
Mm-hmm.
non-denominational, but that was in hindsight. I sort of didn't have enough of a frame of reference at the time, but in hindsight, they were categorically Christian
Oh, sure. Yeah.
non-denominational. And the high school that I was at had a chaplain who was the minister for one of the churches in
Mm-hmm.
town, and and they were decent about trying to kind of explain other religions and other cultures in kind of the religious studies class that we had to take for a wee while. But there was definitely a lens being brought to all of that
Sure.
explanation. Go ahead.
Oh, so I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying, that even through school, like even maybe just culturally, like religion was kind of a part of, what was happening around you, even if it wasn't something coming from your parents. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a background radiation, I guess, to a point where it wasn't even overtly perceived
Mm,
as religion. You know, school assembly, you would get together once a week or however often it was, and you sang a song. And in hindsight, it was a super
yeah,
religious
yeah,
song. But at the time, it was just like, okay, well, these are the words. Cool, let's just
sure.
get through this. And I've been as I've kind of grown up and matured, I've been all over the spectrum on religion as a whole. I think the one thing that I've come to in my kind of approaching middle age is there are too many smart people and people who I respect who I kind of find out later are overtly religious to be as dismissive as I was maybe in
Mm,
my 20s. I would say that I've kind of I've definitely gone through my militant atheist
Yeah.
phase.
Sure.
Um,
We all
and I'm
have
not.
that piss and vinegar stage, whether we're atheists, whether we're
Yeah,
Christians, like whatever we land on, we're all piss and vinegar filled 20-year-olds at some point.
yeah. I probably ran it for a bit longer than I
Yeah,
probably should have.
we all did.
But I mean, I'm still, I don't think you can look around at the world we have today and say that organized religion is the greatest idea we've ever had. There's a lot of atrocities and a lot of atrocities historically that have been
Totally.
kind of justified by organized religion, and that's separating the institution from the
Right.
spirituality, I guess. And I think that's still true today to
Mhm.
an extent. But you know, I think when it comes down to personal belief, for me, a lot of kind of religious teaching just feels too neat.
Too neat.
Um,
What do you mean?
yeah. Well, so I'll use Christianity just because it's my
Yeah,
biggest
sure.
frame of reference. But there's at a high level of abstraction, you've got your heaven and hell, you've got your good versus evil, and if you die, you get to go to the nice place, and Sky Daddy's watching over you. It just feels like with what we know about physics and with what we know about how the universe works, like that, it just feels like a really
Mhm.
trite, easy narrative. And like, of all the possibilities out there, what's the likelihood that it's like this but better, but also like this but worse if you're a bad
Yeah.
person? Like it just, like I say, too neat is kind of the only way I can
Yeah.
describe it. Like the real world, the real world that we interact with is so much more nuanced and varied, and such a more interesting
Mhm.
texture that if you squint at a lot of kind of organized religious, kind of institutionalized religion teachings, you come away with like a caricature of the world.
Yeah.
That like and I could be dead wrong, and some of it is kind of like so the physicist Richard Feynman has or had, I guess, this interesting quote that like in the context of human kind of evolution, you know, religion kind of positions humanity as the pinnacle of evolution and kind of like made in
Mhm.
God's image. Um, and his point, the way that he framed it was that if he goes out on the street and comes back in and goes, "Oh, I just went out on the street and I saw a red car with the license plate 96754. What are the odds that I would find that license plate on that red car?" And like a lot of it is about kind of the point is about the
Mm.
determinism, right? If you say that where we are today is the only outcome that's acceptable, then like the odds are so astronomical that you kind of have to believe in some sort of like structure that has guided the process to this point. But at the same time, like if you wind the tape back and play it again, is this the only is humanity the only way that the tape plays out, or is there a world where things go slightly differently and the whales run the planet?
Yeah.
um, and I think my view is that it's very easy to kind of back into a supreme being that we are made in the likeness of, when there isn't a supreme being to kind of go, look, we are the
Mm.
likeness. And it's very kind of kind of narcissistic at the species level, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I'm just on a bit of a rant right
I
now,
mean, I
but like,
think you're onto something. Like it's resonating with me. I think, I've been a Christian like, I don't know, 20 years or so when I was like 15. Um and just in the last few years, like I've certainly been on this journey of like, cuz I think what you were initially saying was this kind of like this neat idea, or I almost kind of interpret it like it's just very black and white and honestly kind of boring to me. Because I think you're right in that it leaves out so much of the nuance and beauty and messiness of what we really experience life to be. And I've kind of been on this journey the last few years of really digging into my own faith and belief, and um and really learning like historically that I think in a lot of ways, unfortunately, like Christianity's kind of been poorly, really poorly represented, because it didn't start out that way. I don't think it started out kind of more what we're talking is like this. We're just trying to figure this out. We're trying to make sense of this, and so yeah, I think you're really onto something, and it's hard to put this stuff into words, man. Like it really is hard to put some of these higher
I
thoughts
mean,
into words.
exactly, and I think that is why it being hard to put things into words 2,000 years ago is how you end up with an abstraction getting handed down,
Sure.
handed down, handed
Yeah.
down, and kind of the the nuance gets knocked off over the years, maybe. But I don't know. Like at the end of the day, for me, the spirituality that I've kind of come to is like either there is no higher purpose, in which case, all right, cool. Well, then I guess we're just doing the best we can and
Let's
let's
make the best of
go.
it.
And then exactly, or there is, in which case, like, well, let's try and make the best of it. And I've kind of, I don't know really whether there's a term for where I've ended up, but kind of disengaged apathy is sort of maybe like at the end of the day, I think that there's been a meme flying about ants. I don't know if you've seen this one, but kind of ants create there's a bunch of ants in your kitchen, and they create a circle and spell out your name, and that's going to get your attention.
I'd say, yeah.
So you sort of go, "Hey, ants, what's going on? What do you want?" And they say, "Oh well, we're just trying to worship our higher power." And you go, "Oh, cool." And then one of them's like, "Well, I want this ant to love me, and he doesn't love me, and I want to marry him." And you go, "Okay, well, okay, let me just squish everybody else, and now it's you and him. Good." And it's kind of a way of kind of reflecting the disconnect between higher powers and kind of the perception at the lower level. It's the idea to me that a higher power exists is you sort of have to say, well, maybe there is something else, and there's no way that I can prove it one way or another. But that higher power caring about me feels off, because like I don't care about a specific ant. I don't know, that is maybe just a bleak worldview. But I don't want, it's not that I would deny that there is anything, but I don't know, it just feels like not necessarily something that I want to get too hung up on. Because like at the end of the day, we're all out here trying to do our best, and like maybe there's a reason, maybe there isn't, but the folks who kind of use their faith as the source of their morality, they scare the shit out of me.
How so?
Well, basically you're saying the only reason that I'm prepared to do something nice for anybody is that somebody might be watching over my shoulder and punish me later. And like that is some serial killer stuff right there.
It's that kind of
just
fear-based
be nice
fear-based love, which seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I would gladly kill you, but I might get punished for it, so I'm not going to. And that's morality. And I'm like, wow, that's a statement about who you are as a person.
Yeah, such restraint. Thank you very much. There was this interesting, I heard about this. I didn't actually look. I heard it on a podcast from this dude I've listened to. There was this study done, brain study, and they studied people that pray. And, one of the groups they studied were people that pray, but people that prayed kind of out of this, this sort of fear-based thing, like, God, I'm sorry, don't smite me. I repent, and all this kind of sort of fear-based language. And then the other group was people that prayed out of more of kind of a loving, appreciative, gratefulness sort of focus. And the study came back, and they actually noticed like growth, because they did this over a number. I don't know how long the study was conducted, but they noticed actual like growth in the brain from the group that was more out of like the love kind of, not the fear-based stuff, but like the more, gratitude and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it's just really fascinating to me that, because I think you're right. And so many people approach really any faith. I don't think this is even just exclusive to Christianity. I mean, I think that's one of our biggest examples. But I mean, we see that in humans, even just in politics or any other kind of leadership scenarios, that we just respond to fear, you know, for better or for worse.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to get better about is, there's kind of a movement in the like startup and entrepreneur adjacent kind of spirituality, meditative kind of space around like morning
Mm,
gratitude
hmm.
and things like that, which is kind of disconnected from directly from spirituality. But I do feel better when I sit down and I fill in my journal and I write down the three things that I actually want to focus on being
Yeah.
grateful for this morning. And even just to a point of like reminding yourself that there are good
Yeah.
things in the world.
Go figure.
um, and yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, it's easy to turn on the
Hmm.
TV and forget that. But it's I think whether you want to anchor that to a higher power or not, what you're saying and that study really sounds like it's onto something. Coming from a negative space
Hmm.
leads to negativity, and coming from a positive space leads to positivity.
It sounds
Um,
so simple when you put it like that. Why am I not doing it more?
I mean, well, I mean, this is honestly when I started out with this journaling thing. It really was like well, people are doing it. I
Hmm.
guess I ought to give it a go. And I was feeling if I say lost, it's probably a little bit melodramatic, but I was in over my head
Yeah.
on a few things. My head was
Hmm.
not in a good space, and just having that kind of clarity of thought to order what's going on, structure my thoughts, structure my day, and actually kind of find peace, I guess, was really beneficial. Now, I did that without the framing of
Hmm.
the higher power, but I can see how it would be easy to kind of make the leap and kind of sort of want to anchor it around that. And, I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing in the way that, like, 10 years ago, I might have been, whoa, spirituality, religion,
Yeah.
no.
Wow. No, that's cool. So, just as we wrap up, I have kind of I mean, this is probably a big question, but one we like to ask is what drives you to make games or to be involved in this industry? Like, what's the thing? We've talked about a lot of stuff between religion and your parents and upbringing, all those kinds of things, but what uh yeah, I guess just what drives you to make games? What do you hope people get out of that experience that you're involved in?
Wow, that feels like a question that I'll need to sit and ponder for a while, or maybe
Yeah.
maybe a question that I ought to have a
Well,
answer
of any of the
for.
things
But
we've talked about too, I mean, yeah.
at the end of the day, like for me, I think there is a connection between, and I'm only just starting to understand this, but the way that I think about like spirituality and higher powers and everything else. I mean, there is a way you can squint at the work that I do with the AI stuff and say like I'm almost trying to understand that through
Mm.
creating something, which is a grandiose way of framing my
No,
work, I
it's
guess.
actually
But
really interesting you say that because I was, as you were talking about, how you relate to higher power, how you think about that stuff. I was thinking about your work in AI. I was even going to kind of ask, like, do you see those two things linked, or how does that relate? Like when you were talking about that ant kind of thing, it made me think about AI stuff. But anyway, go on, say more.
yeah, I crack wise about it and kind of like, the AI revolution is coming and it's going to automate
Yeah,
everybody out of a job, but it's okay because I'm going to be the AI
that's right.
messiah,
Yeah,
so I'm
you're
good.
just going to be on the right
Um,
side of history.
well, exactly. Which I mean is it's easy to crack jokes about, but there is like a nugget of maybe something there. But also, we're so far away from that right now that it's not a
Mm,
realistic concern. Um, Honestly, the thing that I'm working towards is I think that we can have. There is a game that I want to play, and I don't think people can make it. I think that the game I want to play is so sprawling and so large that it's infeasible for humans to actually create that world. Imagine a World of Warcraft where um, the world is so big and there is so much happening in it and there is so much varied content that it's not run over here and sit and wait for the boss to respawn, but everybody is having their own experience and everybody is having like a different kind of their own journey. One of the things with a lot of games right now is that everybody flows through the same journey, and in some ways that parallels kind of books, fiction, movies, in that there is a single journey and a single authorial intent, and we're trying to communicate a single story. For me, I played EVE Online for 5 years
God
as an
bless you.
alliance leader. I know, right? It was. I hated that game for 3 of those 5 years, but the social constructs around it kept me playing. And the Eve is a fascinating game in a lot of ways because it is more of a framework and a sandbox universe than most any online game right now. But one of the core experiences for me, or core reference points, is Dungeons and Dragons. Tabletop RPGs are probably to this day some of the pinnacles of game playing experiences, and you can see that in the way that those games have persisted. But what drives those games to be as good as they are? My thesis is that it's the human intellect, the dungeon master driving that game and tailoring it and tweaking it and adapting it to the people, and kind of allowing them to explore their own stories within the framework of the universe that's been created. And video games don't do that. And we are not going to be able to do that soon. But if there's one thing that I want to be able to kind of, at the end of the day, say that I did with my career, it's moving the needle towards that and empowering players to do things that are, my D&D group are all heavily lateral thinkers. We will always kind of do an encounter upside down, kill the boss, and then figure out how to deal with all the minions.
And you're just sitting there scratching his head.
Yeah, well, so but video games don't allow for that. They don't allow you to kind of if you think about Skyrim allows you to collect brooms. You can collect all the brooms in the world. But if I had a whole backpack full of brooms, I could make a ladder and climb over this tall wall. And that mechanic doesn't exist in the game. But what if it could? A great example of that, one step towards that is a game like Scribblenauts. Scribblenauts is a series of games that the concept is that the character has like a magic journal or something, and anything you write down appears in the world. And that means that on the back end, they've got a massive library of assets, and anything that the player types in theoretically can be spawned into the world. So you can create a ladder, you can create a wall, you can if you've got to fly from one end or if you've got to get from one end of the map to the other end of the map, you can do that in so many different and diverse ways. You can get a rocket pack or build yourself a plane, or any way that you want to approach that problem, you can do, which is a really interesting step towards this kind of idea of allowing players to explore spaces and do what they want.
Man, yeah.
And that empowerment is kind of what I want as a player, and what I think we can ultimately deliver through AI.
You made me think of when my first kind of memorable experience with Breath of the Wild, the recent Zelda game. And the very beginning of the game, you just kind of wake up in this temple. You don't really know what's going on. You don't have anything. You just like have some clothes. And I walked out of this temple, and there's this axe like laying there. And I'm like, oh, cool, an axe. Like, I'm going to pick that up, obviously. So I pick it up and I equip it, and I see this tree. And I'm like, well, obviously I need to hit something with this axe. So I hit the tree and it falls down. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could like get some firewood from that or something. So I hit the tree again. It turns into a little bundle of firewood. Like, I wonder if I can like start a fire with this thing. And so I find a rock, or I forget what it is in the actual game, but and I set it next to the thing, and then I hit it with the axe, and it turns into a fire. And that to me was like, it seems stupid even just saying it, but it was like so revolutionary that you could follow this process of like logic, and it worked. And I think that, I mean, that is barely scratching the surface of what you're talking about, but it's a step in that direction, you know, like if you can think it,
Absolutely.
you should be able to do it in the game, you know? So
Yep.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, hey man, we're out of time. But I did want you to share any ways for people to follow the work that you do, either, you know, Zynga stuff, IGDA stuff, you personally, like how can people find you?
So best place is probably on Twitter. I'm at Luke D, Luked. And you will get a bit of R-rated content there when I go off on a
Great.
rant about something. But yeah, there's usually just me screaming into the void. But yeah, that's kind of the core place to keep tabs on me and what I'm doing, both on the IGDA side and on the Zynga side. But I would encourage everybody to kind of check out the IGDA Foundation. You can find us on Twitter at IGDA Foundation and IGDAFoundation.org. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff there. And if you're interested in kind of games, you know, I should state the mission of the IGDA Foundation at least once in this hour, because I think it actually ties in, and it really does kind of neatly encapsulate it. The way that we think about things on the foundation side is that we want the games to be reflective of the stories of everyone. And we believe that the best way for games to be, you know, reflecting those stories and welcoming to everybody is for everybody to be able to make games. And that's why we have this big focus on diversity and inclusion. You know, I'm not able to tell kind of African stories, mythology of Africa, but I'm pretty sure there's some really cool, interesting stories and games that would come out of people being empowered to kind of make those games. We've seen that with I think it was called Never Alone, maybe, and it was a game made by an Inuit team. And the fact that they were able to tell their culture's stories in a game environment was so amazing. But the more that we can kind of make games that are reflective of everyone, but also like bring different lenses and different backgrounds and different perspectives to game development, the more that we can make really cool things. You know, if 3 people have the same exact kind of lived experience, then you get one kind of set of perspectives on how a game should be made. So for me, obviously, I'm coming at everything with the AI lens, but also like this kind of Scottish AI tech in the blood kind
Sailing
of
extraordinaire. You forgot that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now there's a game that hasn't been made in a while.
Well, we'll leave it in your capable hands.
But yeah, so exactly. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chat about all this stuff, Chris.
You can find me. I am on Twitter. I haven't used it since 2014, but you can find me on there, CL Gwaltney. But better than that, you could probably find me on Facebook, also CL Gwaltney. Drew, who's not here, you can find him on Twitter. He's super active. Drew Dixon 82. And find Love Thy Nerd everywhere. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can like us on Facebook. You can also join our Facebook group, Love Thy Nerd Community, where it's just a bunch of nerds talking about nerdy stuff, which is always a good time, in my opinion. We've also got a podcast network. So we have 2 other podcasts, the Free Play Podcast, which they're just way funnier than me, and Drew for that matter. Luke, I just met you, so I don't know if they're funnier than you yet, but that remains to be seen. There's also the Poll List podcast, which is all comic book stuff. So if you're into comics, even if you're not into comics, they will get you into comics. So check those out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Appreciate you guys listening. And thanks again, Luke. This is it for Humans of Gaming.